Russell Thornfield stared through the two-way mirror at his wife, Brooke, as she sobbed dramatically for the cameras. Her mascara ran down her cheeks in perfect tragic streaks as she clutched a photo of their twins, 6-year-olds Aiden and Sophia. "My husband," she choked out, her voice breaking at precisely the right moment. "He tampered with our car. Cut the brake lines. He wanted us all dead." She looked directly into the camera. He wanted the insurance money more than he wanted his family. Detective Greg Walsh placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Russell noted the lingering touch, the slight squeeze. Something familiar there. Too familiar. Behind Russell, his attorney Flynn Patterson whispered, "Don't react. That's exactly what they want." Russell nodded, his face a mask of stone. 15 years of marriage to Brooke had taught him to hide his emotions. Their story had begun at Stanford, where they'd met as students. Russell studying mechanical engineering, Brooke pursuing communications with a minor in theater. The irony didn't escape him now. "They're calling you the family killer," Flynn said, sliding over a newspaper. "The press has already convicted you." Russell's company, Thornfield Precision Engineering, had secured a government contract 6 months ago. The success should have been the highlight of his career, but it had coincided with subtle changes in Brooke. Late nights, deleted text messages, new lingerie he never saw. The classic signs he'd been too busy to notice. 3 weeks ago, Russell had picked up Brooke's phone by mistake and seen a message preview from Greg that read, "When can we meet again? I can't stop thinking about." The text disappeared before he could read more. When he'd asked casually about anyone named Greg, Brooke had laughed it off. "Probably Greg from accounting. We're working on the charity fundraiser together." Russell had let it go, deciding to trust her. Now, watching her performance for the news cameras, he realized his mistake. "The prosecution has your financial records," Flynn continued. "They're building the case that you were in debt, that the life insurance policies on Brooke and the kids, $2 million total, gave you motive." "Those policies were Brooke's idea," Russell said quietly. "And your fingerprints are all over the brake line and under the hood. It's my car. I do routine maintenance myself." Flynn nodded. "The DA knows that. But they'll argue you used your engineering expertise to make it look like an accident." Russell's gaze remained fixed on Brooke as Detective Walsh handed her a tissue. Their fingers touched longer than necessary. "She planned this," Russell said. "And I think I know who helped her." Flynn followed his gaze to Detective Walsh. "The lead detective on your case? That would be convenient for her." "I need to get out of here, Flynn. My children are with your sister-in-law. Safe for now. Let me handle this. I'll get you bail." As Flynn left, Russell looked down at his hands. The same hands that had built his company from nothing, that had cradled his newborn twins, that had trusted and been betrayed. These hands would not remain shackled for long. And once free, they would dismantle the perfect frame that Brooke and her lover had constructed. The anger that flared within him was not hot and volatile. It was cold, precise, and patient. Like the machines he engineered to exacting specifications, Russell began calculating the steps needed to disassemble the trap he'd been placed in. Behind Brooke's performance, he could see the truth in her eyes. Not sorrow, but triumph. She thought she'd won. She had no idea what she'd awakened. Chapter 2. Calculated Risks. The county detention center smelled of industrial bleach and desperation. Russell sat in the visitation room, orange jumpsuit hanging loosely on his frame. 2 weeks of jail food and sleepless nights had hollowed his cheeks. But his eyes remained sharp, analytical. Across from him, Flynn slid documents across the table. The prosecution's discovery. "It's worse than I thought." Russell scanned the pages with an engineer's precision. The case against him appeared airtight. Financial records showing the business struggling despite the government contract. Life insurance policies updated 6 months ago. His browser history showing searches about car accidents and brake failures. "I never searched for any of this," Russell said, tapping the paper. Flynn nodded. "Someone accessed your computer. Maybe while you were sleeping, maybe remotely. Brooke isn't technically savvy enough for that. But her boyfriend might be." Flynn lowered his voice. "I had my investigator look into Detective Walsh. He worked cyber crimes for 3 years before homicide." Russell leaned back, pieces clicking together. "What about the brake lines? The forensics? They claim the cut was made with precision. Clean. Professional. The kind an engineer would make. And the crash itself? Brooke and the twins walked away with minor injuries." Flynn's expression tightened. The crash happened on Ridgeview Road. It's a 15 miles per hour zone with a safety barrier precisely where the car hit. Almost as if she knew exactly where to crash for maximum drama, minimum risk, Russell finished. There's more, Flynn said. I've been digging into Walsh's case records. 3 of his previous arrests involved spouses accused of attempting to murder their partners. All 3 ended in convictions. All 3 had significant insurance policies involved. You think he's done this before? Helped frame people? Flynn shrugged. I don't have proof, but it's a pattern worth investigating. Russell's mind raced through calculations and probabilities. I need something concrete, Flynn. Something that puts either Brooke or Walsh at the scene tampering with the car. We've got a hearing for bail tomorrow. Judge Harriman. She's tough, but fair. Russell barely heard him. His focus had shifted to his twins. Have you seen Aiden and Sophia? Flynn's expression softened. Your sister Melody has been allowed supervised visits. They're asking for you. Brooke's sister has temporary custody, but she's completely under Brooke's influence. Melody saw them. What did they say? Aiden mentioned something strange. He said Mommy had a friend help fix the car the night before the accident. A friend who wasn't Daddy. Russell's eyes narrowed. Did he see this friend? No. He heard voices in the garage after he was supposed to be asleep. Thought it was you at first, but realized the voice was different. For the first time in weeks, Russell felt a flicker of hope. We need to find out if anyone saw Walsh at my house that night. Already on it. And I've hired a forensic team, independent from the police lab. If there's evidence under that hood that doesn't match your DNA profile, we'll find it. Russell nodded, his mind shifting from defense to offense. We need to look into Brooke's financials too. Not our joint accounts. She must have something separate I don't know about. What are you thinking? Brooke doesn't do anything without a backup plan. This isn't just about insurance money. There's something else. As Flynn gathered the documents, Russell added, and check property records. Look for anything purchased in the last year that isn't in our names. Flynn raised an eyebrow. You suspect real estate? Brooke always talked about a lake house in Vermont. Somewhere just for her when she needed space. Russell's lips formed a thin line. I think she's been planning her exit strategy for a while. The twins and I just became inconvenient variables in her equation. After Flynn left, Russell returned to his cell. He lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, mentally reconstructing the events leading to the crash. Brooke had insisted on taking the car that day, though she usually preferred her SUV for transporting the twins. She'd been adamant despite his offer to drive them himself. In the quiet of his cell, Russell made a silent promise to his children. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about protecting them from a mother who had been willing to risk their lives for her scheme. As the lights dimmed for the night, Russell's resolve hardened. He had built precision machines all his life. Now he would build something else, the perfect counterframe. Chapter 3. The Crash. 3 weeks earlier, Brooke Thornfield checked her appearance one last time in the rearview mirror, dabbing at her lipstick before turning to smile at the twins in the back seat. Ready for ice cream after school, my loves? Aiden and Sophia cheered, their matching dark curls bouncing with excitement. They had Russell's eyes, observant, curious, always noticing details. Is Daddy meeting us? Sophia asked. No, sweetie. Daddy's very busy today. Brooke's smile remained fixed as she pulled into traffic. What the twins didn't know, what Russell didn't know, was that the family SUV was now parked 3 blocks away in the lot of an abandoned strip mall. Detective Greg Walsh had helped her move it before dawn, then followed her home in his personal vehicle. The sedan they were currently in, Russell's car that he meticulously maintained, had been prepared the night before. Not sabotaged enough to cause a fatal crash, but enough to create a plausible accident. Greg had been careful, wearing gloves as he worked under the hood while Brooke kept watch. Remember, he'd instructed, aim for the barrier on Ridgeview. Low speed. Deploy the airbag, but minimize impact. The brake line will be compromised enough to give you an excuse, but not enough to make the car completely uncontrollable. Now, as Brooke drove along the planned route, she glanced at her watch. The timing needed to be precise. A patrol car would happen to be nearby to respond immediately. The officer, a rookie who wouldn't ask too many questions, would document exactly what Greg had coached her to say. 15 years with Russell had taught Brooke how to manipulate him. The quiet engineer had been the perfect husband on paper, stable, successful, devoted to their children. But the perfect husband had become the perfect mark. The life insurance policies had been her first move, suggested casually after a colleague's sudden death. Russell, ever practical, had agreed. Then came the careful construction of financial troubles for his company, not enough to alarm him, but enough to establish motive. Greg had helped with that too, using his police connections to access and slowly manipulate their financial records. The final touch had been the computer searches, conducted late at night while Russell slept. A trail of evidence pointing to premeditation. As Brooke approached Ridgeview Road, she felt a moment of hesitation. The twins were chattering happily in the back seat, unaware of what was about to happen. She pushed the doubt away. They would be fine, scared, but fine. The crash would be controlled. And afterward, they would have their mother to comfort them, to tell them how their father had tried to hurt them all. "Mommy, you missed the turn for school," Aiden said, his watchful eyes catching the deviation from their usual route. "We're taking a different way today," Brooke replied smoothly. "A shortcut." As she rounded the corner onto Ridgeview, Brooke took a deep breath. The safety barrier loomed ahead, a low concrete wall designed to prevent cars from going into the drainage ditch beyond. Perfect for her purposes. Brooke pressed the brake pedal. As expected, it went further than normal, but still engaged. She pressed harder, feigning panic, then swerved toward the barrier. "Mommy!" Sophia screamed. The impact was jarring but controlled, exactly as planned. The airbag deployed, striking Brooke with enough force to leave bruises. The twins, secured in their booster seats, were jerked forward but protected by their seat belts. Silence filled the car for 3 heartbeats. Then Brooke began to scream. "My babies! Are you okay?" The brakes, they didn't work. Tears came easily as she unbuckled herself and turned to check the twins. Both were crying but uninjured beyond minor seatbelt bruises. Perfect. Within minutes, as expected, a patrol car pulled up. "Officer Jenkins, right on schedule." "Ma'am, are you all right?" he called, running toward the vehicle. Brooke stumbled from the car, clutching her side as if injured. "My children," she gasped. "Please help my children." As Officer Jenkins helped Aiden and Sophia from the car, Brooke delivered the line she'd rehearsed countless times. The brakes failed. They didn't work. She looked up with tear-filled eyes. "My husband. He was working on the car last night. He's been acting so strange lately." Officer Jenkins's eyes widened as he caught her implication. Exactly as Greg had predicted. "Ma'am, are you suggesting?" "I don't know," Brooke sobbed. "I don't want to believe it. But the insurance policies, he made us get them updated recently. Said it was just being responsible, but..." She let her voice trail off, planting the seed. Within an hour, Detective Greg Walsh arrived at the scene, maintaining a professional distance as he took her statement. His eyes conveyed the message. Everything is going according to plan. That evening, as the twins slept in a hospital room under observation, Brooke gave her first interview to a local reporter who Greg had tipped off. With practiced vulnerability, she voiced her terrible suspicions about her husband. By morning, Russell Thornfield was being brought in for questioning. By evening, he was under arrest for attempted murder. Watching the news coverage from her sister's home, Brooke allowed herself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. Soon, Russell would be convicted. The insurance policy on him, the one he didn't know existed, would pay out once he was imprisoned for attempting to murder his family. Combined with the twins' trust funds that she would gain control of as their sole guardian, Brooke and Greg would have nearly $5 million to start their new life. In another part of town, Russell sat in a holding cell, still in shock. As the reality of his situation settled over him, his engineer's mind began analyzing what had happened. Someone had set him up. And in that moment, he made a vow. Whoever had engineered this frame would discover they had made a fatal miscalculation. Chapter 4, Behind Bars. All rise for the Honorable Judge Eleanor Harriman. Russell stood alongside Flynn as the judge entered the courtroom. After 3 weeks in county lockup, the bail hearing represented his first chance at freedom and his first opportunity to see Brooke face-to-face since his arrest. She sat in the front row of the gallery, dressed in a conservative navy dress, her blonde hair pulled back in a modest ponytail. Beside her sat Detective Walsh, maintaining a professional distance but close enough to offer support. Russell noted Walsh's hand briefly touch Brooke's shoulder as the judge entered, a gesture that appeared comforting to observers but revealed intimacy to Russell's knowing eyes. "Judge Harriman, A silver-haired woman with penetrating eyes reviewed the documents before her. This is a bail hearing for Russell Thornfield, charged with 3 counts of attempted murder in the first degree. Mr. Patterson, you may present your arguments. Flynn stepped forward. Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal record, strong ties to the community, and is not a flight risk. He's a business owner who employs 27 people locally. The evidence against him is entirely circumstantial. The prosecutor, District Attorney Madeline Rivera, countered. Your Honor, the defendant is accused of attempting to murder his wife and 6-year-old twins for insurance money. We have forensic evidence showing the brake lines were deliberately cut in a manner consistent with Mr. Thornfield's engineering expertise. Given the severity of these charges and the potential penalty of life imprisonment, we believe Mr. Thornfield poses both a flight risk and a danger to his family. Judge Harriman turned to Russell. Mr. Thornfield, do you understand that if I grant bail, you will be prohibited from any contact with your wife and children pending trial? Yes, Your Honor, Russell replied, his voice steady despite the pain of being separated from his twins. After considering both arguments, Judge Harriman spoke. I'm setting bail at $1 million. The defendant will surrender his passport, submit to electronic monitoring, and remain at least 500 feet from his wife and children at all times. Flynn's hand clasped Russell's shoulder in victory. $1 million was steep but manageable. Russell could liquidate some company assets. As the bailiff let him out, Russell locked eyes with Brooke. For a fraction of a second, her mask slipped, revealing not fear or sadness, but irritation. She quickly recovered, leaning into Detective Walsh's protective embrace, playing the terrified victim. That brief glimpse of the real Brooke confirmed everything Russell suspected. 3 days later, Russell sat in Flynn's office, free but shackled by an ankle monitor. Melody, his younger sister, paced nervously. The media is camped outside your house, she said. You can't go back there. He'll stay with me, Flynn decided. My guest house is private, secured, and technically owned by my law firm. It's the perfect place to regroup. Russell barely heard them. He was reviewing the forensic reports Flynn had obtained. The brake line wasn't completely severed, he noted. It was partially cut, enough to cause eventual failure, but not immediate catastrophe. Flynn nodded. Someone who wanted to create an accident, but control where and when it happened. Someone who wanted to ensure the passengers survived, Russell added. This wasn't an attempted murder. It was an elaborate frame. Melody stopped pacing. But why? What does Brooke gain? Russell looked up. That's what we need to find out. Flynn, what did your investigator discover about Brooke's finances? Flynn pulled out a folder. She's been siphoning money from your joint accounts for 18 months. Small amounts. Never enough to trigger your attention. The funds went to an account under the name Bryn Thomas's. We believe that's an alias. Total transfers, approximately $217,000. Russell's jaw tightened. And Detective Walsh. More interesting by the day. Before becoming a detective, he worked in financial crimes. He's investigated 3 cases with similar patterns. Spouses accused of attempting to murder their partners for insurance money. All 3 resulted in convictions. Any connections between those cases and Brooke? Flynn hesitated. Not directly, but we found something else. He pushed forward a photograph. This was taken 2 years ago at a police charity gala. Your wife attended as part of her volunteer work with the Victim Support Program. The photo showed Brooke laughing with several officers. Standing beside her, drink in hand, was Detective Walsh. They knew each other, Russell said quietly. Long before the crash. There's more, Flynn continued. Remember that lake house you mentioned? We found it. Purchased 6 months ago by Bryn Thomas, Brooke's alias. It's in the Catskills, not Vermont. Fully furnished, utilities connected. It looks like a getaway home, waiting for its owner. Russell stared at the property documents, mind racing. The government contract my company secured was 7 months ago. The financial opportunity made me more valuable to her dead or imprisoned than divorced. But why risk the twins in the crash? Melody asked, horrified. Because they're the beneficiaries of trust funds from our grandparents, Russell realized. Funds that Brooke would control as their guardian if I were incarcerated. Funds she can't access in a normal divorce because I'm the trustee until they turn 21. The room fell silent as the full scope of Brooke's plan became clear. We need more than theories, Flynn finally said. We need hard evidence linking Brooke and Walsh to the sabotage. Russell's expression hardened. I might know where to find it. The week before the crash, I installed a new security system at home, upgraded from our basic camera setup. Brooke doesn't know that it backs up to my private cloud, not just the local storage she and Walsh probably deleted. Flynn leaned forward. You have footage? If they tampered with the car the night before the crash, it should have captured something. I need access to my secure server at the office. That's risky, Flynn cautioned. Your bail conditions prevent you from going to work. I don't need to go physically. I just need remote access and someone I trust inside the building. Russell turned to his sister. Melody, how good are your acting skills? Melody blinked. What do you have in mind? You're going to interview for an executive assistant position at my company. During the tour, you'll need access to my private office. As Russell outlined his plan, he felt something he hadn't experienced since his arrest: control. The engineer in him was back in his element, designing a solution to a complex problem. The frame around him had been constructed. Now he would disassemble it the same way, piece by careful piece. Chapter 5: Hidden Connections. The forensics lab hummed with activity as Dr. Maya Winters examined the evidence from Russell's car. As the head of Advanced Forensic Analytics, an independent lab known for its cutting-edge technology, Maya had seen countless attempts to manipulate crime scenes. This case, however, had captured her professional curiosity. The partial severance of the brake line shows unusual characteristics, she explained to Flynn and Russell, who watched intently. The cut was made with a specialized tool, likely a tube cutter designed for precision work. Something an engineer would have, Flynn noted. Yes, but also something a professional mechanic would use, Maya countered. More importantly, we found microscopic metal shavings near the cut that don't match the composition of the brake line itself. Russell leaned forward. Meaning? The tool used left traces. Most tube cutters have a hardened steel wheel, but this one contained tungsten carbide, a premium material used in high-end tools. If we can locate the specific tool, it could exonerate you or confirm your guilt. I don't own any tools with tungsten carbide cutting wheels, Russell said. My equipment is standard grade. Maya nodded. There's more. We found partial fingerprints on the underside of the hood, areas that wouldn't normally be touched during routine maintenance. They were carefully wiped, but our new enhancement techniques revealed fragments. We're running comparisons now. Flynn glanced at his watch. How long until results? 24 hours. Maybe less. As they left the lab, Russell's phone buzzed with a message from Melody. Package secured. Meeting you at the safe house at 7 p.m. Flynn raised an eyebrow. Your sister came through? She always does, Russell replied with the first genuine smile since his arrest. Melody arrived at Flynn's guest house, clutching a small external hard drive. You were right. The cloud backup was intact. I downloaded everything from the week before the crash. The three gathered around Flynn's laptop as Russell connected the drive. The security footage showed multiple camera angles of Russell's home, including the garage where the car had been parked. There, Russell said, freezing the playback. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m., the night before the crash. A figure in dark clothing slipped into the garage through the side door. That's not Brooke, Melody observed. Too tall. Keep watching, Russell said grimly. Moments later, Brooke appeared in the frame, speaking to the intruder. Though the footage had no audio, their body language suggested intimacy, confirmed when Brooke stood on tiptoes to kiss the man. Detective Walsh, Flynn whispered as the man turned, his profile briefly illuminated by the garage's motion sensor light. They watched as Walsh opened the hood of Russell's car and began working underneath, occasionally referencing his phone as if following instructions. Brooke stood watch, periodically checking the door to the house. They didn't know about the new camera system, Russell realized. The old one only covered the main entrance and driveway. After 20 minutes, Walsh closed the hood and showed something to Brooke on his phone, diagrams, based on his gestures. She nodded, and they shared another kiss before Walsh departed through the side door. This is it, Flynn said, eyes wide. This proves conspiracy and tampering. Walsh wasn't officially assigned to the case until after the crash, so he can't claim this was part of any investigation. Russell stared at the frozen image of his wife conspiring with her lover. We need to be careful how we use this. If they realize we have the footage, they might destroy other evidence. We need to find that tool first. I have an idea, Melody said. The video shows Walsh checking his phone repeatedly, probably looking at instructions for how to cut the brake line. Those searches would be in his phone records. Flynn nodded slowly. If we can convince a judge there's probable cause, we could subpoena his phone records and search history. Even better, Russell said. We find out where he got that specialized tool. Maya said it was high-end, with tungsten carbide components. Not something you'd buy at a local hardware store. Flynn's phone rang, interrupting their planning. After a brief conversation, he turned to them with a surprised expression. That was Maya. They got a hit on one of the partial fingerprints. It's not a match for either you or Brooke. Walsh, Russell asked. No, someone named Antonio Valles. He has a record, 2 counts of auto theft 5 years ago, now runs a repair shop called Tony's Auto Service on the south side. Russell frowned. I've never heard of him. But maybe Brooke or Walsh has, Melody suggested. Could he be the supplier of the specialized tool? Flynn was already pulling up information on his laptop. Tony's Auto Service is 4 miles from your house. Small operation, specializes in foreign imports. He looked up. Wait. One of his regular customers is listed as the Metro Police Department. They take their undercover vehicles there. The pieces began falling into place. Walsh would know this mechanic through work, Russell said. He could have gotten advice, tools, maybe even had him do a practice run on another vehicle. We need to talk to this Tony Valles, Flynn decided. But carefully. If he's working with Walsh, he could tip him off. I have a better idea, Russell said, a plan forming. What if we don't approach him directly? What if we set a trap that gives him a reason to come forward on his own? Flynn leaned back, intrigued. What kind of trap? The kind that appeals to someone with a history of crime who's trying to stay clean. Fear and self-preservation. Russell turned to his sister. Melody, how convincing can you be as a desperate, frightened woman? Melody's expression hardened with determination. What do you need me to do? As Russell outlined his plan, he felt a dark satisfaction. For too long, he had been reacting to Brooke and Walsh's scheme. Now it was time to seize the initiative. Behind his exterior, something had changed in Russell Thornfield. The man who had once believed in systems, processes, and the fundamental order of things now understood a harsher truth. Justice didn't simply happen. Sometimes it had to be engineered. Chapter 6. Building the Defense. Tony Valles wiped grease from his hands as he finished with the BMW's transmission. 10 years ago, he'd been boosting cars like this, not fixing them. 5 years of probation and a second chance from a sympathetic judge had set him on a different path. Now his repair shop, while small, had a solid reputation. He'd even secured a contract with the police department for their undercover vehicles. Ironic, given his history. The bell chimed as the front door opened. Tony stepped into the reception area to find a well-dressed woman in her mid-30s, anxiety written across her face. Tony Valles? She asked, voice trembling slightly. That's me. How can I help you? The woman glanced nervously at the door before speaking. My name is Melody. I need to talk to you about my brother, Russell Thornfield. Tony's expression remained neutral, but his heart rate accelerated. The Thornfield case had been all over the news. What about him? I know you were involved, Melody said quietly. Your fingerprints were found on his car, the one with the cut brake lines. Tony felt the blood drain from his face. Lady, I don't know what you're talking about. I never touched that car. The forensics lab has your prints. They'll be contacting the police soon. Melody stepped closer. But I came to you first because I think you were used. Detective Walsh brought you into this, didn't he? Probably told you it was police business. Tony's silence confirmed her suspicion. Walsh isn't just a corrupt cop, Melody continued. He's sleeping with my brother's wife. They set Russell up, and they used you. When this goes to trial, guess who they'll blame for the technical work? The ex-con with a record of auto theft. Tony sank into a chair, mind racing. I didn't cut any brake lines. Walsh brought me a diagram, asked if it would work to cause a controlled failure. Said it was for an undercover operation, testing vehicle sabotage detection. I told him it would work, gave him the right tool. His eyes widened with realization. He set me up as the fall guy. There's a way out, Melody said. My brother's lawyer can arrange immunity if you testify about Walsh's request. Otherwise, when those fingerprint results officially hit the police department. Tony rubbed his face, leaving a smudge of grease. Walsh has friends in the department. If I talk, I'm a dead man. If you don't talk, you're going to prison. Again, but this time for attempted murder. After a long moment, Tony nodded. What do you want me to know? Flynn's office buzzed with energy as he, Russell, and Melody processed Tony's statement, formally recorded by Flynn's investigator. Tony confirmed that Walsh approached him 3 weeks before the crash, Flynn summarized. Asked for advice on creating a controlled brake failure for what he claimed was a police training exercise. Tony provided the specialized tube cutter and diagram, but insists he never touched the actual vehicle. His fingerprints say otherwise, Russell noted. He admits he examined similar brake lines on a police vehicle to demonstrate the technique. Those prints could have transferred via the tool Walsh borrowed. Melody leaned forward. The important part is that Tony saw Walsh and Brooke together at his shop a week before the crash. They didn't know he recognized her from the society pages. His girlfriend follows that stuff. They were definitely intimate. Russell processed this information. So we have the security footage, Tony's statement, the fingerprint evidence, and now documentation of their prior relationship. Is it enough? Flynn's expression was grim. For reasonable doubt, yes. To get the charges dropped completely? We need more. Walsh is decorated, respected. It's still a he said, she said situation. Then we need someone else to corroborate, Russell decided. Someone who saw them together when they claimed they hadn't met. I've been digging into those previous cases, Flynn said. The 3 where spouses were convicted of similar crimes. I found something interesting. He pulled out files. In each case, the accused had substantial life insurance or assets. In each case, Walsh was either the responding detective or took over the investigation early. And in each case, the surviving spouse sold their property within a year of conviction and moved away. You think Walsh has done this before? Helped frame people for financial gain. I think it's worth looking into where those survivors ended up, and whether there's a money trail connecting them to Walsh. Russell stared at the case files, mind racing. We're still missing something crucial. Something that would explain why Brooke would risk everything. Risk our children, for this scheme. Melody's phone chimed with a message. Her eyes widened as she read it. Maya has something. She wants us at the lab now. Dr. Maya Winters looked exhausted but triumphant as they gathered around her workstation. On her screen was a detailed chemical analysis. We found traces of a substance on the brake fluid reservoir cap, she explained. It's a specialized degrading agent that breaks down rubber seals gradually. When combined with the partial cut in the line, it creates a failure that appears natural, something that would happen during driving, not in a garage. Can this substance be traced? Flynn asked. That's the breakthrough. It's not commercially available. It's a proprietary compound developed for the military to test vehicle vulnerabilities in extreme conditions. Maya looked directly at Russell. And guess who has a government contract to supply similar compounds for aerospace testing? Russell's breath caught. Thornfield Precision Engineering. My company. Specifically, a classified project you began 7 months ago. The compound found in your car is a variant of one stored in your company's secure lab. The implications hit Russell like a physical blow. Someone at my company is involved. Someone with access to restricted materials. Maya nodded. I ran employee background checks against Walsh's known associates. One name popped. Mitchell Landry, your head of security. Before joining your company 3 years ago, he worked for Metro PD. His supervisor, Greg Walsh. Russell closed his eyes as pieces clicked into place. Mitchell had access to every area of the facility, including the secure lab. He'd also been the one to recommend upgrading the home security system, likely knowing the exact capabilities of the original cameras. Mitchell could have provided the compound, advised on the security systems, maybe even helped with the financial record manipulations, Russell said quietly. He has the technical expertise and the access. Flynn was already making notes. We need to move carefully. If Mitchell realizes we suspect him, he could destroy evidence or warn Walsh. I have an idea, Russell said, his expression hardening. But it's risky, and it means using myself as bait. As Russell outlined his plan, Maya and Flynn exchanged concerned glances. The strategy was bold, potentially dangerous, but undeniably clever. You're talking about entrapment, Flynn cautioned. I'm talking about giving them exactly what they want, Russell corrected. A vulnerable target who appears to be grasping at straws. Meanwhile, we'll be recording everything. The trial starts in 10 days, Flynn reminded him. This plan needs to work quickly. Russell's eyes held a cold determination that sent a chill through the room. It will. Because unlike Brooke and Walsh, I'm not underestimating my opponent. The engineer who had built machines all his life was now constructing something else, the perfect trap for those who had tried to destroy him. Chapter 7. The trial begins. The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters as Russell climbed them alongside Flynn. Cameras flashed, capturing his composed expression, the dark circles under his eyes, the perfectly tailored suit that hung slightly loose on his frame after weeks of stress. Mr. Thornfield, do you have any response to your wife's allegations? How do you explain the evidence against you? Flynn raised a hand, silencing the barrage. My client maintains his complete innocence. We look forward to presenting the truth in court today. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with spectators and press. Russell spotted Brooke in the front row, wearing a conservative gray dress, hair pulled back, the picture of a traumatized wife. Beside her sat Detective Walsh, professional, somber, a respectable distance between them. On the opposite side sat Melody, Dr. Maya Winters, and a nervous Tony Vallis. The mechanic had agreed to testify after Flynn arranged immunity with the DA's office. Judge Harriman called the court to order. The State versus Russell Thornfield will now commence. Are both sides ready for opening statements? District Attorney Rivera approached the jury first. With practiced gravity, she painted Russell as a calculating killer who had used his engineering expertise to attempt the perfect crime. The evidence will show that Mr. Thornfield meticulously planned to murder his family for financial gain. Specialized tools, precise cuts to the brake lines, and a clear financial motive through multiple insurance policies worth millions. This wasn't a crime of passion, but a coldly calculated attempt to eliminate his family while making it appear accidental. When Flynn's turn came, he addressed the jury with equal conviction. The prosecution's case relies on circumstantial evidence and ignores crucial facts. Yes, Russell Thornfield is an engineer. Yes, he maintained his own vehicles. But the evidence will show that someone else had the expertise, opportunity, and true motive to sabotage that car. Someone who carefully framed Mr. Thornfield to conceal a web of deception, infidelity, and greed. As Flynn returned to his seat, Russell noticed District Attorney Rivera conferring with Detective Walsh, whose expression had darkened. Their plan was working. Walsh was beginning to worry. The prosecution's case unfolded over the next 3 days. Forensic experts testified about the brake line sabotage. Financial analysts detailed the insurance policies and alleged company struggles. Computer forensics presented the damning search history from Russell's laptop. Throughout, Flynn's cross-examinations planted seeds of doubt. He established that anyone with basic knowledge could have researched brake failures online. He confirmed that Russell's fingerprints would naturally be present on a car he regularly maintained. He demonstrated that the financial struggles had been exaggerated through selective analysis. On the fourth day, Brooke took the stand, the moment the media had been waiting for. Under Rivera's gentle questioning, she described a husband who had grown distant, obsessed with financial concerns, spending unusual time in the garage before the crash. I never wanted to believe Russell could hurt us, she testified, voice breaking. But after the crash, when the police showed me the evidence, I realized I never truly knew the man I married. Flynn approached for cross-examination with calculated restraint. Mrs. Thornfield, prior to your husband's arrest, how would you describe your marriage? Brooke maintained her composure. Happy, I thought. But clearly I was wrong. Would you say you were faithful throughout your marriage? D.A. Rivera shot to her feet. Objection. Relevance. Your Honor, Flynn countered. The defense contends that Mrs. Thornfield's relationship with another man provided motive for framing her husband. It goes directly to motive and credibility. Judge Harriman considered briefly. I'll allow limited questioning on this line. Proceed carefully, Mr. Patterson. Flynn turned back to Brooke. Mrs. Thornfield, do you know Detective Greg Walsh outside his professional capacity as the lead investigator in this case? A flicker of unease crossed Brooke's face. Only through the investigation. So you never met Detective Walsh before the day of the crash? No. Flynn nodded, seemingly accepting her answer. Mrs. Thornfield, are you familiar with a charity gala for the Police Benevolent Association held 2 years ago? You attended as part of your volunteer work. Brooke hesitated. I attend many charity functions. Flynn approached with a photograph. Your Honor, Defense Exhibit 24. This shows Mrs. Thornfield at the gala in question, conversing with Detective Walsh. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom as the photograph was admitted. On the stand, Brooks' composure slipped momentarily. I meet many officers through my volunteer work. I didn't recall this specific interaction. Mrs. Thornfield, are you familiar with a property in the Catskills purchased 6 months ago by someone named Bryn Thomas? Brooks' eyes widened almost imperceptibly. No. Interesting. Flynn produced another document. Because we have financial records showing transfers from your personal account to one under the name Bryn Thomas, who then purchased this lakefront property. Your Honor, Defense Exhibit 25. D.A. Rivera objected again, but the damage was done. The jury had seen Brooks' reaction, the momentary panic before she regained control. Flynn continued, leading Brooke through a series of questions that individually seemed manageable but collectively painted a damning picture. With each answer, she dug herself deeper into provable lies. When Flynn finally returned to his seat, Russell noted a sheen of perspiration on Brooks' forehead. Across the courtroom, Detective Walsh's jaw was clenched tight, his eyes darting between Brooke, Flynn, and the jury. That evening, in Flynn's office, the defense team reviewed their progress. Brooke held up better than I expected, Melody said. But she made critical mistakes, Flynn noted. Denying knowing Walsh before the crash when we have photographic evidence. Claiming no knowledge of the Catskills property despite the financial trail. The jury saw those contradictions. Russell remained focused on the next phase. What about Mitchell Landry? Our investigator reports he took the bait, Maya confirmed. After receiving that accidental email about secure server access, he spent 3 hours in the company lab last night. The monitoring software tracked his searches. He was looking for ways to corrupt the security footage backup. Perfect, Russell said. And Tony is prepared for tomorrow? Flynn nodded. He's nervous, but committed. His testimony about Walsh requesting the specialized tool could be the turning point. Russell stared out the window at the city lights. And the final piece, our surprise witness. Confirmed, Flynn said with a satisfied smile. Ready to testify on Monday. For the first time since his arrest, Russell allowed himself to imagine victory. Not just legal exoneration, but complete vindication. The engineer who had been framed was about to demonstrate the dangers of underestimating a mind. Chapter 8. The Surprise Witness. The courtroom fell silent as Tony Valles took the stand. The mechanic fidgeted with his tie, clearly uncomfortable in formal attire and under the intense scrutiny of the packed gallery. After establishing Tony's credentials and background, Flynn moved to the heart of the matter. Mr. Valles, did you have any interaction with Detective Greg Walsh regarding brake systems prior to the crash involving the Thornfield family? Tony cleared his throat. Yes. About 3 weeks before the accident, Detective Walsh came to my shop. Said he needed consultation on a special police project about vehicle sabotage detection. And what specifically did he ask you? He showed me diagrams of brake systems. Wanted to know how to create what he called a controlled failure. Something that would cause brakes to fail during operation, but not immediately after tampering. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. At the prosecution table, D.A. Rivera whispered urgently to her assistant, while Detective Walsh stared at Tony with barely concealed anger. Did Detective Walsh request any specific tools from you? Yes. He borrowed my precision tube cutter with the tungsten carbide wheel. Said he needed it for demonstration purposes. Returned it 4 days later. Flynn approached with an evidence bag. Is this the tool in question? Tony examined it through the plastic. Yes, that's mine. You can see the TV I etched on the handle, my initials. And Mr. Valles, did you ever see Detective Walsh with anyone else during these interactions? Tony hesitated, then nodded. Once. A blonde woman came to the shop with him. They seemed close. I recognized her later on the news as Mrs. Thornfield. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Harriman gavelled for order. Flynn pressed on. Mr. Valles, why didn't you come forward with this information earlier? I was scared. Walsh is a cop. He knows people. And I've got a record. Who'd believe me over him? But then the forensics lab found my fingerprints from when I handled that tool, and I realized I was being set up as the fall guy. During cross-examination, D.A. Rivera attacked Tony's credibility, highlighting his criminal record and suggesting immunity had motivated false testimony. Tony remained steadfast, his simple, consistent answers resonating with the jury. When Tony stepped down, Flynn called his next witness. The defense calls Mitchell Landry. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Mitchell, Russell's head of security, had not been on the witness list. As he reluctantly approached the stand, Russell observed Detective Walsh shifting uncomfortably, whispering something to DA Rivera. After swearing in, Mitchell sat rigidly, avoiding eye contact with Russell. "Mr. Landry, what is your position at Thornfield Precision Engineering?" Flynn began. "Head of security. I oversee physical and digital security for the company. And before that, I was with Metro Police Department for 12 years. Did you work with Detective Greg Walsh during that time?" Mitchell hesitated. "Yes, he was my supervisor for 3 years." Flynn established Mitchell's access to all areas of the company, including the secure lab containing specialized compounds. Then he shifted tactics. "Mr. Landry, 3 nights ago, you accessed the secure lab at Thornfield Precision Engineering. Can you explain why?" Mitchell paled. "Routine security check. At 11:47 p.m., accessing files related to the proprietary compounds used in military testing. I don't recall specific files." Flynn approached with a printout. "This is a log of your activity that night, captured by monitoring software on the company server. It shows you spent 42 minutes examining files related to rubber-degrading compounds, the exact compound found in Mr. Thornfield's vehicle." Mitchell's composure cracked. "I want a lawyer." Judge Harriman intervened, advising Mitchell of his rights. After consultation with a court-appointed attorney, Mitchell returned to the stand with a new strategy: silence. To each of Flynn's questions, he invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The impact on the jury was profound. Without saying a word, Mitchell had confirmed the defense's theory of conspiracy and inside assistance. As court adjourned for the day, Russell noticed Brooke and Walsh in an intense, whispered argument near the prosecutor's table. Their perfect plan was unraveling, strand by strand. The next morning, Flynn dropped a bombshell. "Your Honor, the defense calls a surprise witness, Tyler Jenkins." Judge Harriman frowned. "Mr. Patterson, surprise witnesses are generally not permitted." "Your Honor, Officer Jenkins only came forward yesterday after learning of Mr. Landry's testimony. As the first responding officer at the crash scene, his testimony is critical and could not have been anticipated." After hearing arguments from both sides, Judge Harriman allowed the witness in the interest of justice. Officer Tyler Jenkins, a fresh-faced patrol officer in his dress uniform, took the stand with obvious nervousness. "Officer Jenkins," Flynn began, "you were the first responder at the scene of the Thornfield car crash, correct?" "Yes, sir." "Was that a coincidence? Or were you directed to be in that area?" Jenkins swallowed hard. "I was told to patrol Ridgeview Road that morning. Detective Walsh suggested it needed extra coverage due to recent complaints. So Detective Walsh positioned you near the exact location where the crash would later occur?" "Objection," DA Rivera called. "Speculation." Sustained. Flynn adjusted. "Officer Jenkins, what did you observe when you arrived at the scene?" "The vehicle had struck the safety barrier. Mrs. Thornfield was very upset, claiming the brakes had failed. The children were scared but not seriously injured." "Did Mrs. Thornfield say anything specific about her husband?" Jenkins hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "She mentioned that her husband had been working on the car the night before. Said he'd been acting strange lately. Mentioned something about insurance." "Did this strike you as unusual? A crash victim immediately suggesting her husband might be responsible." "At the time, I was focused on securing the scene. But thinking back, yes, it seemed rehearsed." "What do you mean by rehearsed?" Jenkins shifted in his seat. "The way she brought up the insurance and her husband's behavior. It felt prepared, like she wanted to make sure I noted it in my report." "And did Detective Walsh arrive at the scene?" "Yes, about 30 minutes later." "Was that standard procedure for a detective to respond to what appeared to be a simple traffic accident?" "No, sir. Usually we'd just file a report unless there were fatalities or major injuries." "So how did Detective Walsh know to come to the scene?" Jenkins looked down. "He said he heard it on the radio. But later I checked the logs. The crash was never broadcast. And when he arrived, he and Mrs. Thornfield kept their distance, acted like they didn't know each other. But I saw them exchange a look when they thought no one was watching." Flynn let the testimony sink in before asking his final question. "Officer Jenkins, why are you coming forward now?" "Because I became a cop to uphold the law, not help frame innocent people." After hearing about Mr. Landry's involvement and the evidence against Detective Walsh, I couldn't stay silent anymore. During cross-examination, DA Rivera struggled to undermine Jenkins' credibility. Unlike Tony Valles, Jenkins had an impeccable record and no immunity deal. His simple honesty resonated with the jury. By day's end, the momentum had shifted dramatically in Russell's favor. As the court adjourned, Russell noticed Brooke slip out a side door, avoiding reporters. Detective Walsh remained behind, engaged in intense discussion with DA Rivera. Flynn leaned close to Russell. Rivera's going to want a deal. Walsh is toxic to their case now. Russell shook his head. No deals. I want complete exoneration, and I want them to pay for what they did to me and my children. Flynn studied his client's face. Over the months of their work together, he'd watched Russell transform from a shell-shocked victim to a strategic force. The mild-mannered engineer had revealed an inner steel that had surprised everyone, except perhaps Brooke, who had underestimated her husband with catastrophic results. Tomorrow, Flynn said, we present our final witness, the one that will end this case once and for all. Russell nodded, grim satisfaction in his eyes. Tomorrow, we close the trap. Chapter 9, Justice Served. The courthouse buzzed with anticipation as Russell took his seat beside Flynn. News of Officer Jenkins' testimony had spread overnight, shifting public opinion. Outside, the crowd that had once vilified Russell now murmured about corruption and frame-ups. Brooke arrived looking strained, the careful victim facade showing cracks. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, her typically perfect appearance slightly disheveled. Detective Walsh entered separately, a calculated move to maintain distance, but too late to be effective. Flynn leaned over to Russell. Rivera requested a meeting this morning. Offered a deal. They drop all charges in exchange for immunity for Brooke on conspiracy counts. And Walsh. They're cutting him loose. Willing to let him face charges if it means saving face for the DA's office. Russell's expression hardened. I told you. No deals. Not after what they did. Flynn nodded, having expected this response. Then we proceed with our final witness. Judge Harriman called the court to order. Mr. Patterson, you may call your next witness. Flynn stood. The defense calls Carlos Menendez. A heavy-set man in his 50s walked to the stand. His weathered face suggested decades of outdoor work, and his hands were calloused and strong. After establishing that Carlos worked as the maintenance supervisor for Ridgeview Estates, the residential area where the crash occurred, Flynn moved to his key questions. Mr. Menendez, were you working in the vicinity of Ridgeview Road the morning of the crash? Yes. I was checking the irrigation system near the safety barrier. We'd had complaints about water pooling on the road. Did you witness anything unusual before the crash? Carlos nodded. Around 7:15 that morning, I saw a blonde woman and a man in the turnout just up from where the crash happened later. They were looking at the barrier, talking and pointing. I thought maybe they were property buyers checking the neighborhood. Flynn produced photographs. Can you identify these individuals? Carlos studied the photos, clear images of Brooke and Detective Walsh. Yes, that's them. The same people I saw that morning. What time did the actual crash occur? About 8:30. I heard the impact and ran over to help. So approximately 1 hour before the crash, Mrs. Thornfield and Detective Walsh were examining the exact location where the vehicle would later hit the barrier? Yes, sir. The courtroom erupted in whispers. At the prosecution table, DA Rivera closed her eyes briefly, recognizing the case was lost. Beside her, Detective Walsh stared at Carlos with undisguised hatred. Flynn continued, Mr. Menendez, why didn't you come forward with this information earlier? I did tell the police at the scene that I'd seen the woman earlier. Detective Walsh was there by then. He took my statement, said he'd follow up. But it never appeared in any reports, and no one ever contacted me again. So Detective Walsh deliberately omitted your witness statement from the official record? Objection. Rivera called, but without her earlier fire. Sustained. Judge Harriman ruled, though her expression suggested she found the testimony compelling. Flynn redirected. Mr. Menendez, how can you be so certain about what you saw that morning? Carlos reached into his pocket and produced his phone. Because I took pictures. I'm an amateur photographer, landscapes mostly. I was checking spots for sunrise photos when I saw them. They were standing right where I wanted to shoot. So I waited, took a few angles with them in the distance to check the lighting. Flynn requested permission to enter the new evidence. After examination by the judge and prosecution, Carlos's photographs were admitted. Clear images of Brooke and Walsh at the crash site an hour before the accident. Examining the barrier, measuring distances with steps. During cross-examination, Rivera made a perfunctory attempt to suggest the photos showed innocent tourist activity, but her heart wasn't in it. The evidence was damning, the conspiracy now undeniable. As Carlos stepped down, Flynn addressed the court. "Your Honor, the defense rests." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, remarkably fast for an attempted murder case. As they filed back in, Russell studied their faces, reading the verdict before it was announced. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Russell Thornfield, not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Russell closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of months of false accusation lifting from his shoulders. Judge Harriman restored order before addressing Russell. "Mr. Thornfield, you are free to go. This court offers its sincerest apologies for the ordeal you have endured." She then turned to the prosecutor's table. "Based on evidence presented in this trial, I am instructing the district attorney's office to immediately open investigations into Detective Greg Walsh, Brooke Thornfield, and Mitchell Landry for conspiracy, evidence tampering, perjury, and obstruction of justice." As the courtroom cleared, Russell watched Brooke being led away by her attorney, their eyes meeting briefly across the room. The mask of victimhood had completely disappeared, replaced by cold fury and, beneath that, fear. For the first time since her betrayal, Russell felt not rage but pity. Pity for someone who had destroyed her life through her own greed and calculation. Detective Walsh was already in custody, surrendering his badge and gun to internal affairs officers who had been waiting for the verdict. Outside on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters, Flynn fielded questions while Russell stood silently beside him, the vindicated man finally free to reclaim his life. "Mr. Thornfield will be filing civil suits against all parties involved in this conspiracy," Flynn announced. Additionally, he will be petitioning for full custody of his children, who were callously endangered by their mother's actions. A reporter called out, "Mr. Thornfield, what do you have to say to your wife now?" Russell stepped forward, his voice steady. "Nothing. She will answer to the courts, to our children, and to her own conscience. My focus now is healing my family and rebuilding what this ordeal has taken from us." 6 months later, Russell stood on the deck of his new home, watching as Aiden and Sophia played in the fenced yard below. The twins had shown remarkable resilience, though they still attended weekly therapy sessions to process their mother's betrayal and imprisonment. Brooke had ultimately accepted a plea deal, 20 years for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and child endangerment. Detective Walsh, refusing to cooperate, faced trial and received 30 years. Mitchell Landry had turned state's evidence, receiving a reduced sentence in exchange for detailed testimony about the conspiracy. The civil suits had been settled out of court, providing financial security for the twins' future. More importantly, Russell had secured sole custody, with Brooke's parental rights permanently terminated due to her willingness to endanger her children in her criminal scheme. Thornfield Precision Engineering had not just survived but thrived under Russell's renewed leadership, with an expanded government contract and strengthened security protocols. Melody joined her brother on the deck, handing him a coffee. The twins seemed better every day. Russell nodded. "Kids are adaptable, more than adults, sometimes. And you? How are you really doing?" Russell considered the question. The experience had changed him fundamentally. The trusting engineer remained, but alongside that identity now existed a more cautious, strategic man who understood the darkest potentials of human nature. "I'm rebuilding," he said finally. "Different blueprints this time. Stronger foundations." Melody smiled, recognizing the engineer's metaphor. The investigator called. They finally tracked down the money from Brooke's hidden accounts. Most of it was transferred to offshore holdings, but they've recovered about 60%. "It was never about the money," Russell said. "It was about truth. About making sure Aiden and Sophia grew up knowing that justice eventually prevails, even when the system initially fails." Below, the twins laughed as they chased each other around the yard, their young lives already beginning to heal from the trauma of betrayal. Russell watched them with quiet satisfaction. The perfect frame had been dismantled, piece by piece, by the very man it was designed to destroy. In the end, Brooke and Walsh had made a fatal miscalculation. They had chosen the perfect victim for their scheme, an engineer with a precise mind, relentless determination, and ultimately, a capacity for strategic thinking that had outmatched their own. Russell sipped his coffee, feeling the autumn sun warm his face. The future stretched before him, no longer defined by what he had lost, but by what he had reclaimed: his freedom, his children, his good name. The rest he would engineer himself, with the same care that had ultimately saved him from destruction. Epilogue, 15 years later. The morning sun cast long shadows across the meticulously maintained grounds of Thornfield Technologies headquarters. Russell Thornfield, now 55, stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his top-floor office, watching employees arrive for the day. His hair had grayed at the temples, fine lines etched around his eyes speaking to both wisdom and hardship. But his posture remained straight, his gaze as precise and analytical as ever. "Dad? Got a minute?" Russell turned to find his son Aiden in the doorway. At 21, Aiden had grown into a thoughtful young man who had inherited his father's mind and passion for engineering. Currently in his final year at MIT, he had been interning at Thornfield Technologies during summer breaks since he was 16. "Always for you," Russell replied, gesturing to the sitting area where architectural plans lay spread across a glass table. "The Singapore expansion?" Aiden nodded, settling into a chair. "I've been reviewing the schematics. I think we can improve the cleanroom efficiency by reconfiguring the airflow systems." He pointed to several technical drawings, explaining his proposed modifications with the confidence of someone raised in the language of engineering. Russell listened with pride. 15 years ago, in the aftermath of the trial that had nearly destroyed their family, he could never have imagined this future. His son following in his professional footsteps, his company expanded from Thornfield Precision Engineering to Thornfield Technologies, a global leader in advanced materials and aerospace systems. What had begun as a modest engineering firm had grown into an enterprise employing over 2,000 people across 3 continents. These modifications could reduce contamination risks by another 12%, Aiden concluded. "Worth the additional investment, especially with the quantum computing division expanding." Russell nodded. "Draft a formal proposal. We'll review it at the executive meeting next week." As Aiden gathered the plans, Russell noticed a subtle tension in his son's shoulders. "Something else on your mind?" Aiden hesitated, then met his father's eyes. "I got a letter yesterday. From her." No clarification was needed. Even after 15 years, Brooke Thornfield remained her, in their household, rarely named, forever defined by her betrayal. "What did she want?" Russell asked, his voice carefully neutral. "To meet. She's being released next month." Good behavior. Russell absorbed this information with outward calm, though inwardly the news landed like a stone dropped into still water. Brooke had been sentenced to 20 years, but was getting out after 15, not unexpected with parole, but jarring nonetheless. "Are you considering it?" he asked. Aiden ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Russell that those who knew them both often commented on it. "I don't know. Sophia already said no. She doesn't even want to know where Mother will be living." The twins had processed their mother's betrayal differently over the years. Sophia, now pursuing her doctorate in psychology at Stanford, had channeled her experience into studying the impact of parental betrayal on child development. She'd completely severed any emotional connection to Brooke, referring to her clinically as "my biological mother" on the rare occasions she came up in conversation. Aiden had been more conflicted, occasionally reviewing news articles about the case as he grew older, trying to understand the woman who had been willing to risk his life for her own gain. "Whatever you decide," Russell said carefully, "you have my support. But remember—" "I know," Aiden interrupted with a small smile. "No obligation to people who haven't earned it." It was a principle Russell had instilled in both his children as they grew, not out of bitterness, but from hard-won wisdom. Trust and relationship were earned through actions, not owed through biology or history. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Thornfield, your 9:30 is here. Dr. Winters and her team from Advanced Forensic Analytics." "Send them in," Russell replied, straightening his tie. Aiden gathered his materials. "Dinner tonight? Sophia's flying in from California." "Wouldn't miss it," Russell affirmed, squeezing his son's shoulder as he passed. Moments later, Dr. Maya Winters entered, followed by two younger colleagues. At 62, Maya had become one of the nation's foremost forensic scientists, her company now the gold standard for advanced forensic technology. The case that had brought her and Russell together 15 years ago had launched both their careers into new trajectories. "Russell," she greeted warmly, embracing him briefly. Their professional relationship had evolved into a deep friendship over the years, though both had been too consumed with rebuilding their lives and raising their respective families for anything more. "Maya, good to see you. How's Darius?" "Retiring next month," she said of her husband. Finally convinced him to step back from the research lab before he works himself into the grave. As they settled into the conference area, Russell studied the presentation materials the team had brought. "These are the new sensing arrays." Maya nodded. 10 times more sensitive than anything currently on the market. Can detect molecular traces that would have been impossible to find 15 years ago. A meaningful look passed between them, both thinking of the case that had nearly cost Russell everything. "We're hoping Thornfield Technologies will partner with us on the production," she continued. "Your nanotechnology division has capabilities we need to scale manufacturing." What followed was an hour of technical discussion, interspersed with casual conversation between old friends. As the meeting concluded, Maya lingered after her colleagues departed. "I heard about Brooke's upcoming release," she said quietly. "Flynn called me last week." Russell nodded. "Aiden just told me he received a letter from her. How are you feeling about it?" Russell considered the question. The raw pain and betrayal had long since transmuted into something else. Not forgiveness, precisely, but a detachment that had allowed him to rebuild without being anchored to the past. "Truthfully, I've moved beyond her. The only concern I have is for Aiden and Sophia." Maya smiled sadly. "They were lucky to have you. Not every child survives that kind of betrayal intact." "We had help," Russell acknowledged. "Good therapy. Melody's unwavering support. Flynn making sure the legal aftermath protected them." Speaking of his former attorney reminded Russell of another pending matter. "Have you heard from Tyler recently?" Flynn mentioned he was considering a run for police commissioner. Maya nodded. "Announced last week. The integrity candidate, they're calling him." Officer Tyler Jenkins had transformed his brave testimony against Detective Walsh into a reformist career within the police department. After the trial, he'd been ostracized by some colleagues, but championed by others seeking to clean up the department. Now, 15 years later, his principled stand had positioned him as a leading voice for police accountability and ethical conduct. "Your recommendation letter will help his campaign," Maya added. "Already sent," Russell confirmed. "After what he risked for the truth, it's the least I can do." As Maya departed, Russell returned to the window, his thoughts drifting to the intricate web of lives that had been forever altered by Brooke and Walsh's scheme. The ripple effects had spread in unexpected directions, creating both destruction and, surprisingly, positive change. The restaurant Russell had chosen for dinner with his children was one of San Francisco's finest, a celebration venue for Sophia's return from Stanford and the rare opportunity to have both his children together. As he arrived, he spotted his sister Melody already at the table, deep in conversation with Sophia. At 48, Melody remained a vibrant force in their family. After playing such a crucial role in Russell's defense, she had discovered a talent for investigation and eventually earned her private investigator's license. Her agency, Phoenix Investigations, specialized in cases of wrongful accusations and overlooked evidence, worked directly inspired by Russell's ordeal. "There he is," Melody called as Russell approached. "We were just debating whether you'd be late." "When has Dad ever been late for anything?" Sophia stood to embrace him. At 21, she was the image of Russell's mother, tall, with intelligent brown eyes and an analytical mind that observed everything. Unlike Aiden, who had embraced the technical side of Russell's world, Sophia had channeled her experiences into understanding human behavior, determined to help others navigate trauma and betrayal. "Looks like I beat Aiden," Russell noted, taking his seat. He texted, "Stuck in traffic coming from the office," Sophia replied. "Already working like a company executive." Speaking of work, Melody interjected, "Your research on familial betrayal got accepted for publication?" "Sophia was just telling me the news." Russell listened with pride as his daughter outlined her research findings, a longitudinal study tracking psychological outcomes in children who had experienced parental betrayal. Her academic advisors had initially worried the topic was too personal, but Sophia's ability to maintain scientific objectivity while drawing on lived experience had produced groundbreaking work. The most significant finding is that outcomes improve dramatically when the remaining parent provides consistent support without vilifying the absent parent, Sophia explained. Children need space to form their own conclusions. Russell caught the implied compliment in her analysis. Despite every justification for bitterness, he had never spoken ill of Brooke to the twins, allowing them to process their feelings without the burden of his own. "Sorry I'm late," Aiden said, arriving slightly breathless. After greetings and drink orders, the conversation flowed easily among the family that had been forged stronger through adversity. It was during dessert that Sophia broached the subject Russell had been expecting. "Aiden told me about the letter from Mother." Her tone remained neutral, academic. "I received one as well." Russell raised an eyebrow. "You didn't mention it." "I didn't see the point. I've already decided not to meet with her." Sophia set down her fork. "My research subjects show that forced reconciliations rarely produce positive outcomes. Any relationship would need to be built on honesty and accountability, not obligation." "I'm still deciding," Aiden admitted. "Part of me wants answers. Questions I've had since I was old enough to understand what happened." Melody's expression softened. "You both know that whatever you decide is valid. There's no single right way to handle this." Russell nodded in agreement. "Your mother made her choices. You're entitled to make yours, without pressure either way." As the evening concluded, Russell found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The family that Brooke had tried to destroy had not merely survived. They had flourished, each member finding purpose that might never have emerged without the crucible they had endured. 2 days later, Russell sat across from Flynn Patterson in the attorney's wood-paneled office. Now in his 60s, Flynn had scaled back his practice but maintained a select client list that included Russell and Thornfield Technologies. Their professional relationship had evolved into a friendship that had weathered the decade and a half since the trial. "The parole board didn't consult me," Flynn was saying, reviewing documents related to Brooke's release. "Not that they were obligated to, but it would have been a courtesy given the circumstances." "What are the terms of her release?" Russell asked. "Standard restrictions. No contact with you unless you explicitly consent. Limited contact with Aiden and Sophia, requiring their written permission. Location monitoring for the first year. Regular check-ins with her parole officer." Flynn removed his reading glasses. "She'll be residing with her sister initially. Employment arranged at a marketing firm owned by a prison reform advocate." Russell nodded, processing the information with his customary thoroughness. "And Walsh?" Flynn's expression darkened. "No parole. He'll serve at least 5 more years, possibly the full 30. His conduct inside hasn't earned him any reductions." He leaned back in his chair. "He still maintains he was set up, claims you engineered evidence against him." A humorless smile touched Russell's lips. "Ironic. Some people never accept responsibility," Flynn observed. "Speaking of which, I saw Mitchell Landry is up for parole next month. His cooperation reduced his sentence significantly." Russell's former security chief had received 8 years for his role in the conspiracy after turning state's evidence. Unlike Brooke and Walsh, he had expressed genuine remorse during the trial, admitting he had been motivated by financial problems and poor judgment rather than malice. "Any chance he'll cause problems once released?" Flynn shook his head. "Unlikely. He's been a model prisoner, earned multiple degrees while incarcerated. His testimony helped convict 3 other corrupt officers from Walsh's circle after the main trial. By all accounts, he's genuinely reformed." "Good." Russell had long since released his anger toward Mitchell, seeing him as a misguided accomplice rather than an architect of the scheme. "There is one other matter," Flynn said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Tony Vallis passed away last month. Heart attack." Russell frowned at the news. The mechanic whose testimony had been crucial to his defense had rebuilt his life after the trial, expanding his auto shop into a successful chain of specialty repair centers across the state. Though they hadn't remained close, Russell had made sure Tony received contracts from Thornfield's corporate fleet services over the years, a quiet acknowledgement of his courage in coming forward. "His widow sent this," Flynn continued. "Apparently, Tony left instructions to give it to you in the event of his death." Russell opened the folder to find a handwritten letter and several photographs. The letter was brief but heartfelt, thanking Russell for giving him a second chance when he testified. The photos showed Tony with his family over the years, standing proudly in front of his expanding business. He never forgot that you helped him after the trial, Flynn noted. Said you were the reason he believed in second chances. Russell studied the photos, reminded that the ripple effects of those terrible events had sometimes led to unexpected growth. Tony had transformed his life, partly because the crisis had given him an opportunity to choose integrity over self-preservation. I'll attend the memorial service, Russell decided, closing the folder. Flynn nodded, then hesitated before asking, have you thought about what you'll do if Brooke attempts to contact you directly? Russell considered the question. For years after the trial, he had anticipated some form of communication from Brooke, perhaps an apology, an explanation, or even further manipulation. But none had come. Her silence had been absolute until these recent letters to the twins. I have no interest in revisiting the past, he said finally. Brooke made her choices. I made mine. The only connection that remains is through Aiden and Sophia, and that's entirely their decision to navigate. Flynn studied his old friend. You've come a long way from that shell-shocked client in my office 15 years ago. Russell allowed a small smile. Necessity is an effective teacher. 1 week later, Russell stood at his sister's kitchen counter, chopping vegetables for dinner while Melody uncorked a bottle of wine. Their weekly cooking session had become tradition over the years, a time for connection away from their busy professional lives. Carlos called today, Melody mentioned, referring to Carlos Menendez, the maintenance worker whose photographs had provided crucial evidence at the trial. His granddaughter is applying for the Thornfield STEM scholarship. Wanted to know if it would be a conflict of interest. Tell him to have her apply, Russell replied. The selection committee operates independently. If she's qualified, she deserves consideration like any other applicant. Carlos had returned to Mexico 5 years after the trial to care for his aging parents, eventually settling in Guadalajara, where he now managed a large residential complex. He and Russell exchanged Christmas cards each year, a simple recognition of the role he had played in ensuring justice. How's your new investigator working out? Russell asked, changing the subject. Melody brightened. Natalie? She's brilliant. Former federal agent with a chip on her shoulder about wrongful convictions. Reminds me of someone else I know. She nudged her brother playfully. As they prepared the meal, their conversation drifted to family matters. Aiden's career progress, Sophia's research, Melody's teenage son who was showing interest in forensic science. Have you heard from Judge Harriman recently? Melody asked as they sat down to eat. Russell nodded. She's being considered for the state Supreme Court. Asked if I'd provide a character reference. Eleanor Harriman had retired from the bench 3 years earlier, but remained active in judicial reform, particularly around evidence handling and witness testimony protocols. The case that had nearly destroyed Russell had ultimately sparked significant changes in how police gathered evidence was validated and scrutinized. She was fair when it mattered most, Russell acknowledged. Her reforms have likely prevented similar miscarriages of justice. Melody studied her brother across the table. Do you ever wonder how differently things might have turned out without her? Without Flynn or Maya or Tony? Russell considered the question. Every day? The difference between freedom and imprisonment, between raising my children and losing them, came down to individuals willing to look deeper than the surface. Speaking of looking deeper, Melody said carefully, Aiden mentioned he's decided to meet with Brooke after her release. Just once, to ask his questions. Sophia's agreed to go with him for support, though she doesn't want to engage directly. Russell nodded, having anticipated this. They needed to make that decision for themselves. They want you to know they don't expect anything from you regarding this. They understand if you never want to hear about it. They're adults, Russell said simply. I trust their judgment. As the evening wound down, Russell's phone chimed with a news alert. He glanced at the screen, then passed it to Melody wordlessly. The headline read, Former Detective Greg Walsh attacked in prison, condition critical. Melody's eyes widened as she scanned the article. Multiple stab wounds. Prison infirmary. No suspects identified yet. Russell absorbed the news with complex emotions. Walsh had been the architect of so much suffering, not just for him, but for others who had been wrongfully convicted through his corruption. Yet Russell had long since moved past wishing harm on the man, finding that indifference was a more peaceful state than hatred. Does it change anything for you? Melody asked quietly. Russell shook his head. No. Whether he lives or dies, my life continues on the path I've built. He lost his power over our family 15 years ago. The headquarters of Advanced Forensic Analytics occupied a sleek building near the University Research Park. As Russell entered the lobby for his meeting with Maya, he noted the awards and recognitions displayed prominently on the walls, many for innovations that had revolutionized evidence processing in criminal cases. Maya greeted him in her office, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. "I appreciate you coming on short notice. The board wanted your input before we finalized the acquisition offer." Russell reviewed the documents she provided, analyzing the proposal for Thornfield Technologies to acquire a controlling interest in AFA. The merger made strategic sense. Combining Maya's forensic innovations with Thornfield's manufacturing capabilities could accelerate development of next-generation investigative tools. "The terms are fair," he concluded. "But I have one condition. You stay on as Chief Science Officer for a minimum of 5 years. This only works with your continued innovation at the helm." Maya smiled. "Already planned on it. I'm not ready for retirement yet." As they finalized details, Maya's assistant interrupted with an update that echoed the news Russell had seen the previous evening. "Dr. Winters, I thought you should know. Greg Walsh died an hour ago from his injuries." Maya thanked her assistant, then turned to Russell. "Does this news affect you?" Russell considered honestly. 15 years ago, it would have. Now, it feels like a footnote to a chapter that's long been closed. Maya nodded. "I examined so many cases he handled after your trial. At least 11 wrongful convictions, potentially more we couldn't prove. Your case exposed a corruption that ran deeper than anyone realized." After concluding their business, they moved to Maya's private sitting area where she served coffee. "Have you heard from Officer Jenkins since the announcement of his campaign?" "We had lunch last week," Russell confirmed. His polling looked strong. "The department needs leadership that understands the cost of corruption firsthand." Tyler Jenkins had risen through police ranks against significant headwinds, his testimony against Walsh initially marking him as a traitor to some colleagues. Over time, however, as Walsh's wider corruption was exposed, Tyler had been vindicated and eventually celebrated as a harbinger of necessary reform. He mentioned his campaign stops include speaking to Academy cadets about ethical decision-making under pressure, Russell added. "Apparently, your case is a central example in their curriculum now." Maya's expression softened. "Some good came from it all, then." "More than I would have imagined possible in those early days," Russell agreed. As their conversation wound down, Maya hesitated before asking, "Will you attend Walsh's funeral?" "Some of his victims are planning to, a form of closure." Russell shook his head. "My closure doesn't require his death or any acknowledgement of it. I moved beyond him years ago." This was the truth Russell had discovered over 15 years of rebuilding. True freedom from those who had tried to destroy him came not from their punishment, but from his own decision to create a life defined by his choices rather than their actions against him. 3 weeks later, Russell stood at the window of his home office, watching the sunset paint the garden in golden hues. The property, nestled in the hills overlooking the city, had been his sanctuary for the past decade, spacious enough for family gatherings yet designed with the precision and attention to detail that characterized everything in Russell's life. The sound of car doors closing drew his attention to the driveway, where Aiden and Sophia were arriving. Today had been their scheduled meeting with Brooke, the first since her release from prison 2 weeks earlier. Russell had deliberately made himself available without pressuring them to share details. Whatever had transpired was theirs to process in their own way. He greeted them in the kitchen, noting the emotional exhaustion in their faces. "Tea," he offered simply. They nodded, settling at the island counter while Russell prepared the familiar ritual that had comforted them through countless difficult conversations over the years. "It was strange," Sophia finally said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Like meeting a stranger who somehow knows intimate details about your childhood." "She's different than I expected," Aiden added. "Smaller somehow. Less formidable." Russell listened, allowing them space to articulate their experience without interjection. "She wanted to explain herself," Sophia continued, clinical detachment evident in her tone. "Offered various justifications, feeling trapped, undiagnosed depression, Walsh's manipulation. Classic post hoc rationalizations consistent with the literature on long-term incarcerated offenders." "Did you get what you were looking for?" Russell asked gently. Aiden considered the question. I think so. Not answers that justify what she did, but seeing her as she is now. It helps me separate the mother I vaguely remember from the reality of who she actually is. She asked about you, Sophia said, watching her father carefully. Wanted to know if you'd remarried, if you were happy. Russell raised an eyebrow, surprised by this detail. What did you tell her? The truth, Sophia replied. That you rebuilt your life around us and your work. That you found purpose in creating something meaningful from what she tried to destroy. And that your happiness isn't her business anymore. Aiden added with a hint of protective fierceness. Russell smiled at his children. These remarkable young adults who had emerged from trauma with such resilience and clarity. Will you see her again? Sophia shook her head definitively. I've confirmed my hypothesis. There's nothing more I need from that relationship. Aiden was less certain. Maybe. Not soon. I need to process this first meeting. Whatever you decide, Russell assured them, it doesn't change us. This family remains solid regardless of her place in your lives. Later, after the twins had departed for their respective homes, Russell sat alone on his terrace overlooking the city lights. The evening had triggered reflections on the long journey from that courthouse 15 years ago to this moment. The company he had built from the ashes of near destruction now employed thousands, pioneering technologies that would outlast him. The children Brooke had endangered had grown into accomplished young adults with bright futures. The forensic innovations sparked by his case had helped countless others find justice. Even the pain had transformed over time, not vanished, but transmuted into a kind of wisdom that informed every aspect of his rebuilt life. Russell had learned that recovery from betrayal wasn't about forgetting or forgiving, but about choosing where to direct his energy and attention. His phone chimed with a message from Flynn. Thought you should know. Brooke gave an interview to be published tomorrow. Claiming remorse, says she hopes for forgiveness. Russell set the phone aside without responding. Brooke's public relations campaign was irrelevant to him now. The life she had tried to destroy had evolved into something she could no longer touch or comprehend. His home phone rang, the private line few people had access to. He answered to hear Melody's voice. Just checking in. Aiden called me about the meeting. They're processing it in their own ways, Russell replied. They'll be fine. And you? How are you feeling about all this resurfacing? Russell considered the question, looking out at the city where he had rebuilt his world piece by piece. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, he said finally. The frame failed. The truth prevailed. Everything since has been by my design, not hers. It was the engineer's ultimate victory, not merely surviving the perfect frame, but using its failure as the foundation for something far stronger than what had existed before. In that, Russell had found not just recovery, but triumph. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.